The chandeliers of the Grand Sterling Hotel glimmered like constellations that night. Every crystal drop caught the light, scattering it across champagne glasses and diamond bracelets. The annual Hearts of Hope Gala was where the city's wealthiest gathered to celebrate generosity, and, more importantly, to show it off. Outside, sleek black cars lined the circular driveway. Chauffeurs in neat black uniforms held open doors as elegant guests stepped onto the red carpet, laughter and perfume drifting into the night air. Among the long line of drivers stood Marcus Reed, 42, his uniform pressed, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He'd been behind the wheel for half his life, first as a taxi driver, then a private chauffeur for the elite. Tonight, though, felt different. Something about the air, the energy, it hummed with anticipation. As the latest Rolls-Royce stopped at the entrance, Marcus opened the back door with practiced grace. A wealthy couple emerged, Mr. and Mrs. Wentworth, socialites known for their art collections and louder-than-life opinions. Mrs. Wentworth adjusted her diamond necklace and sniffed. "Try not to scratch the car when you park it this time," she muttered without even looking at Marcus. "Yes, ma'am," he replied calmly. She didn't thank him. She never did. When they disappeared inside, Marcus slipped behind the wheel again and pulled into the valet area. Dozens of other drivers mingled nearby, chatting quietly or checking their phones. But Marcus didn't join in. His eyes lingered on the grand entrance, where cameras flashed and laughter echoed. From inside, through the tall glass doors, he could see glimpses of glittering gowns, champagne fountains, and gold table settings. He'd driven these people for years. Doctors, investors, politicians, men and women who barely noticed the man opening their doors. But Marcus never let it get to him. He had patience and a plan. Inside, the ballroom was a spectacle. A 12-piece orchestra played a soft jazz melody, while servers glided between tables with trays of hors d'oeuvres. At the center of the room stood a grand stage draped in navy velvet, a large banner above it reading, "Hearts of Hope Charity Gala, Building a Better Tomorrow." Maria Wentworth laughed loudly at the head table, surrounded by other donors. "Oh, these events are so predictable," she said, sipping her wine. "The same people giving the same speeches. It's all for publicity anyway." Her husband nodded. "At least it keeps our names in the paper. Did you see who's attending tonight? The mayor, that young tech billionaire, and someone anonymous? Apparently, there's a mystery donor giving 7 figures this year." "A mystery donor?" She laughed. "Probably another trust fund brat trying to buy reputation." Moments later, Marcus entered the lobby quietly, adjusting his cufflinks. Gone was the black driver's cap. Now he wore a simple but elegant tuxedo, tailored perfectly to his frame. His silver watch gleamed under the light. He walked confidently past the valet desk, past the guards, and toward the ballroom. At the door, an usher frowned slightly. "Sir, I'm sorry, this area's reserved for." Marcus smiled gently, handing over an embossed invitation. The usher blinked as he read the name. "Mr. Marcus J. Reed, special donor." "Oh, my apologies, Mr. Reed. Right this way." Inside, heads turned as he entered. Not because they recognized him, but because of his presence. There was something quietly commanding about the way he moved, the calm in his step. He didn't rush to join anyone. He didn't hover at the edges. He simply stood near the back, taking in the room that once looked down on him. Meanwhile, Mrs. Wentworth spotted him and frowned. Wait, isn't that the driver? The one who brought us here?" Her husband squinted. "Impossible. He must be working valet." But when Marcus was handed a glass of champagne by one of the servers, she nearly choked on her drink. "That is him," she hissed. "What is he doing in here?" As if in answer, a voice echoed across the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Tonight, we're honored to introduce someone who's changed the lives of hundreds of families through his anonymous contributions. For years, he's asked for no recognition. But tonight, we insisted. The crowd quieted, murmurs spreading. Marcus's eyes softened. He hadn't planned to be recognized, but sometimes, fate had a sense of timing. The announcer continued, "Please welcome to the stage our top donor, Mr. Marcus Reed." The room froze. All around, forks clattered onto plates. The same people who had brushed past him, ignored him, ordered him to wait outside in the cold, now stared as the driver they dismissed walked toward the stage. Mrs. Wentworth's face went pale. He can't be serious," she whispered. But Marcus didn't look at her. He straightened his shoulders, passed through the sea of stunned faces, and climbed the steps to the stage under the bright white spotlight. As he reached the microphone, he smiled slightly and said the words that silenced the entire ballroom. "Funny thing about people, they'll thank you for your service when you're carrying their luggage, but not when you're carrying their future." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed. Mrs. Wentworth clutched her husband's arm. And Marcus, the invisible driver, looked out over the crowd that once laughed past him and said quietly, "Let's talk about what generosity really means." The ballroom fell silent. Not the polite kind of quiet that fills a speech, but the deep kind that ripples through people when they realize they've judged someone wrong. Marcus stood steady under the white spotlight, the faint hum of the microphone echoing his breath. He looked across the sea of expensive suits and designer gowns, faces he knew all too well, people who had spoken over him, dismissed him, or waved him away without a glance. He cleared his throat gently. "You know, for a long time I thought kindness was something only rich people could afford. Turns out, the ones who have the least often give the most." He paused, scanning the crowd. At one of the front tables, Mrs. Wentworth lowered her gaze, pretending to look at her phone. "I started as a driver in this city," Marcus continued. "You might have seen me, maybe even told me to wait outside while you finished your dinner." He smiled softly, but the room knew it wasn't humor. "Back then I was invisible, a face in a uniform. People didn't say hello, they just handed me keys. I learned a lot about humanity sitting behind the wheel, mostly about who people are when they think no one's watching." A low murmur moved through the audience. "But I didn't stay invisible," Marcus went on, "because while I was waiting in parking lots, I was listening. I was learning. I was reading financial books between shifts, watching patterns, studying investments. Every extra dollar I made, tips, overtime, double shifts, went into one thing, my own company." Someone near the back whispered, "He's a CEO?" Marcus nodded slightly, as if hearing it. 10 years ago, I started a logistics firm with one second-hand delivery van. Now, Reed Transport serves 7 states and employs over 600 people. Half of them, men and women who came from the same jobs I did. Cleaning, driving, doing the work no one sees." The silence deepened. It wasn't pity now. It was respect. "And tonight," Marcus said, "I came not to be thanked, but to remind us all dignity isn't a luxury. It's a right. Every person who opens your door, carries your bag, or serves your drink deserves the same respect you'd give the person signing your paycheck." A quiet round of applause began, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Mrs. Wentworth's husband tried to join in, clapping awkwardly, but his wife's frozen glare stopped him halfway. Marcus raised a hand, smiling humbly. "I'm not a preacher. I'm not a saint. I've made mistakes too. But I never forgot where I came from, or how people made me feel when they thought I didn't matter." He took a deep breath. "That's why my donation tonight isn't just money. It's a fund dedicated to training and promoting working-class people into leadership roles. Because talent doesn't come from wealth. It comes from grit." The applause swelled louder. But as it did, Marcus's eyes drifted to one table, the one where the Wentworths sat stiff and silent, their champagne untouched. He walked toward the edge of the stage, eyes locked on Mrs. Wentworth. Mrs. Wentworth, he said calmly. A few heads turned toward her. She flinched. Why, yes. You once told me, Marcus said softly, to make sure not to scratch your car. I remember because you said it every single time I opened your door. Even when it was raining. Even when I'd been standing for hours waiting for you. Her face turned pale. He continued, voice calm but firm. You were worried about the paint on your car, ma'am. But I was worried about the roof over my head. You didn't see me then, but I saw you. And I learned something that day. You can polish your diamonds, but you can't polish your character. The crowd gasped. Mrs. Wentworth's husband muttered, Marcus, please. Marcus raised a hand politely. Don't worry, sir. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to educate. The people who serve us are not beneath us. They're around us. And sometimes they might just be the ones writing the checks. The applause roared now, long, thunderous, unstoppable. Marcus waited for it to quiet down, then smiled faintly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll stop stealing the spotlight. After all, I still remember how to drive. The crowd laughed, breaking the tension. Even the mayor on the front row stood to clap. As Marcus stepped down from the stage, cameras followed him, flashes lighting up the room. He shook hands with community leaders, journalists, even a few humbled billionaires who avoided his gaze. Near the back of the room, the event coordinator whispered into her earpiece. Make sure we get a statement from him. This story's going viral before dessert. Outside, on the terrace overlooking the city, Marcus finally breathed. The cold air hit his lungs like clarity. He leaned against the marble railing, looking down at the line of black cars still waiting under the streetlights, the same place he'd stood for years. He smiled to himself. A voice came from behind him. Mr. Reed. He turned. It was a young valet, barely 19, holding his hat nervously. I just wanted to say, your speech was incredible, sir. I'm saving up for college, and hearing that, it meant a lot. Marcus smiled warmly. What's your name? Darnell, sir. Marcus nodded. You keep that drive, Darnell. I started where you are now. Darnell blinked. You were a valet? I was every kind of worker who got underestimated, Marcus said. And I learned something that got me here. You can start anywhere, as long as you don't stay invisible. The boy smiled. Thank you, sir. Marcus looked back through the glass, at the glittering ballroom where people now whispered his name with respect instead of dismissal. The night had flipped, and for once, the reflection staring back at him in that glass wasn't just a driver. It was a man who'd finally arrived. By the next morning, Marcus Reed's name was everywhere. Social media feeds, local headlines, business blogs, all flooded with photos from the gala. Driver turned millionaire donor stuns gala guests. He was ignored at the door until he owned the night. Marcus Reed, the man who reminded the rich what respect means. Clips of his speech had gone viral overnight. One short video, the moment he said, "You can polish your diamonds, but you can't polish your character," had already hit 2 million views by sunrise. At the Grand Sterling Hotel, the gala organizers were fielding calls from reporters, charities, and talk shows begging to feature Marcus. Everyone wanted a quote, a photo, a statement. But Marcus didn't answer any of them. He was back at his modest home on the city's south side, drinking black coffee at his kitchen counter, dressed simply in a t-shirt and jeans. His phone buzzed every few minutes with notifications, but he let them ring. He didn't need the attention. He'd said what needed saying. Meanwhile, across town, the Wentworth residence was a very different scene. Mrs. Wentworth sat at her marble breakfast bar, scrolling through her tablet with trembling hands. Every article had her photo in the background, that split second of shock on her face when Marcus walked on stage. Some captions were merciless. Socialite's arrogant reaction to donor speech backfires. Woman who mocked her driver watches him become the star of the gala. Her husband rubbed his temples. Maria, the PR team says we need to get ahead of this. Issue an apology. Something public, heartfelt. I can't believe this, she snapped. We gave thousands to that event, and now I'm the villain? Her husband sighed. You were rude to him. More than once. She slammed the tablet down. He was a driver. He looked at her quietly. And now he's a donor. Maybe that's the point. By noon, Maria Wentworth had arranged a meeting through her assistant. She wanted to apologize in person, hoping it might cool the growing storm online. Marcus agreed reluctantly. They met in a small cafe downtown, nothing like the glittering rooms she was used to. The place smelled of roasted beans and warm bread. The barista didn't recognize her, which already made her uneasy. Marcus was already there, sitting by the window reading a newspaper. He looked calm, even friendly, but his eyes still carried that quiet depth, the kind that made people rethink their words before speaking. She approached slowly. Mr. Reed. He folded the paper, stood, and shook her hand politely. Mrs. Wentworth. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sitting down. I know I owe you an apology. Marcus leaned back slightly. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Wentworth. Respect is something you give freely or not at all. But I'm listening. Her lips pressed together. I realize now I was unkind, dismissive. You were always professional and she hesitated. I never saw you as more than help. That was wrong. Marcus nodded slowly. It takes courage to admit that. She exhaled in relief. So, you accept my apology? He looked out the window, sunlight glinting off the passing cars. I do. But I want to ask you something. She blinked. Of course. If I were still your driver, Marcus said quietly, would you still be here? The question hit like a punch. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. That's the problem, Mrs. Wentworth, he said gently. You're not apologizing to me. You're apologizing to the version of yourself that got caught. Her face flushed. That's not fair. It's honest, he said softly. And I'm not saying this to hurt you. I just hope you think about it next time someone opens a door for you. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. You're right. He smiled faintly. Maybe now you'll see people for what they are, not what they wear. For the first time, she truly looked at him. Not as the man who had driven her car, but as someone wiser than her entire circle of friends. I will, she whispered. When she left, Marcus sat there for a long time, staring at his reflection in the coffee window. He didn't feel satisfaction. He didn't feel revenge. He felt closure. He opened his phone for the first time that day. Dozens of missed calls, journalists, talk shows, even the city's mayor's office requesting a meeting. But one message stood out from the rest. It was from the Hearts of Hope Foundation. Mr. Reed, we've decided to rename our annual scholarship in your honor. The Marcus Reed Fund for Dignity and Opportunity. He smiled quietly, typing a short reply. Thank you. Let's make sure it reaches the ones who need it most. Later that week, Marcus was invited back to the hotel for a press conference. Cameras lined the ballroom again, the same room where he'd once been invisible. But this time he wasn't walking in as a driver or even as a donor. He was walking in as a symbol. A journalist asked, Mr. Reed, after everything that happened, what lesson do you hope people take from your story? Marcus smiled, hands folded. That status doesn't define worth. That you can't measure a person by the uniform they wear. Because the world changes when we stop underestimating people and start understanding them. Flashes popped. Reporters murmured. Mrs. Wentworth, sitting quietly in the audience, lowered her head. Not out of shame, but respect. Outside, as Marcus stepped into the sunlight, Darnell, the young valet from the night of the gala, ran up to him grinning. Mr. Reed, they offered me a scholarship from your fund. I'm starting business school next fall. Marcus laughed, shaking his hand. That's what I like to hear. Sir, Darnell said. I don't know how to thank you. Marcus looked out at the busy street, the rows of cars gleaming under the bright afternoon sun. Just make sure, he said, that when you make it to the top, you don't forget who's holding the door open for you. The boy nodded, his eyes shining. And as Marcus walked toward his car, not to drive it but to be driven this time, he smiled. Because sometimes, the greatest reward isn't wealth or applause. It's watching the cycle break, one act of dignity at a time. A full year had passed since the night the driver took the stage. The world had changed for Marcus Reed, not in wealth or luxury, but in meaning. His company had doubled in size, his foundation had funded hundreds of scholarships, and every week, new letters arrived at his office from people whose lives had shifted because of his story. He kept one framed note on his desk. It was from Darnell, the young valet who had earned the first Marcus Reed scholarship. I got my acceptance letter, Mr. Reed. You were right. I'll never forget the people who opened doors. Marcus read it every morning. It reminded him that power only mattered when it lifted someone else. But tonight, as he adjusted his tuxedo in the mirror, something in his reflection made him pause. The same hotel, the same gala, the same glittering chandeliers. Only this time he wasn't the outsider. He was the guest of honor. When he arrived at the Hearts of Hope Gala 2025, the valet stepped forward eagerly. Mr. Reed, pleasure to see you again, sir. We've all been waiting. Marcus smiled. You new here? Yes, sir, the valet said proudly. But I know your story. Everyone does. Marcus chuckled. Then I'll trust you with this beauty, he said, tossing the keys to his black electric sedan. Inside, the scene was familiar. Gold decor, polished marble floors, and laughter echoing through the ballroom. But something subtle had changed. The staff moved differently. Smiles felt genuine. Guests actually greeted servers, thanking them with eye contact and warmth. Marcus nodded to himself. The message had spread. A soft voice broke his thoughts. Mr. Reed. He turned, and there she was, Mrs. Maria Wentworth. Gone were the glittering diamonds and the sharp tone. She wore a simple navy gown this time, her hair tied back neatly, her eyes calm. Good evening, Marcus said politely. Good evening, she replied softly. You look well. So do you, he said. They stood in silence for a moment before she spoke again. I wanted you to know, your speech last year changed me. Truly. I sold my shares in a luxury label and started a nonprofit. We train underprivileged teens for hospitality jobs. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Really? She nodded. It felt right, and I never would have done it without you calling me out that night. He smiled warmly. You called yourself out, Maria. I just gave you the mirror. A small laugh escaped her lips. Still as poetic as ever, Mr. Reed. Later, when Marcus took his seat at the center table, the host stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back the man who reminded us what true generosity looks like, Mr. Marcus Reed. Applause thundered through the hall. But as he stood, Marcus didn't feel pride, he felt purpose. He walked up to the same stage where, 1 year ago, he'd spoken as the invisible man who shocked the rich. Now he stood as the man they looked up to. But instead of basking in the applause, he held up a hand to quiet them. Thank you, he began, his voice steady. Last year I stood here and spoke about respect, about seeing the people who serve you, and I've seen progress since then. I've seen companies change their hiring policies. I've seen staff treated as people, not positions. That gives me hope. He paused, letting the silence breathe. But there's still more to do. Kindness isn't a speech, it's a habit. Dignity isn't a donation. It's a daily choice. The real test isn't how you treat people under the lights. He glanced toward the waitstaff in the back. It's how you treat them when no one's watching. The crowd nodded, deeply moved. Even the younger guests, the ones glued to their phones minutes earlier, listened. Marcus smiled faintly. And tonight, I'm not the only one donating. I'm proud to announce that a former Gala guest has pledged a major gift to support our cause. The lights shifted slightly as Mrs. Wentworth rose from her table, modest but radiant. Mrs. Wentworth, Marcus said warmly, will be donating $3 million to expand the Reed Foundation for Dignity and Opportunity. Her program, New Beginnings, will help train service industry workers to move into management roles. Applause erupted. The sound filled the room, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. Maria smiled humbly, eyes wet with emotion. We all have to start somewhere, she said softly. Marcus nodded. That's the point. No one's story ends where it begins. After the speeches ended, Marcus stepped away from the spotlight, wandering into the service hallway, the quiet place behind the glamour where the hum of kitchen life replaced polite chatter. He found a young dishwasher loading plates into the machine, sleeves rolled up, sweat shining under the bright kitchen light. Hard night? Marcus asked kindly. The young man turned, startled. Oh, Mr. Reed, sir. Sorry, I didn't expect. Marcus smiled. No need for that. You're doing the hardest work here. The boy laughed nervously. Just doing my job. Good, Marcus said. But remember, it's never just a job. You never know who's watching, or where life's steering you. The young man grinned. You sound like someone who's been here before. Marcus chuckled. You have no idea. As he stepped back into the ballroom, the music swelled again. Guests danced, laughed, toasted, and celebrated. Not just wealth, but worth. And there, under the bright lights, Marcus felt something settle inside him, peace. He wasn't the man who'd been overlooked anymore. He wasn't even the man who'd proven everyone wrong. He was the bridge between the worlds, the voice reminding both sides that humanity sits higher than hierarchy. Outside, as he prepared to leave, he walked up to the valet stand. A familiar smile greeted him. Mr. Reed. Darnell. Marcus laughed. You're still here. The young man grinned, holding up a clipboard. Part-time now, sir. Business school keeps me busy. Marcus clapped his shoulder proudly. Good. Keep going. The boy looked up at him, eyes bright. You changed everything, sir. Marcus smiled. No, Darnell. We changed it one story, one act, one person at a time. He slid into his car, the city lights reflecting across the windshield. As the driver started the engine, Marcus looked once more at the hotel entrance, a place that had once made him feel small. Now it stood as a reminder that sometimes the very door that shuts on you is the one you were meant to own. 10 years later, the morning sun bathed downtown in gold. The same streets where Marcus Reed once drove his worn-out sedan now carried banners that read, The Reed Foundation, 10 years of dignity and opportunity. A large auditorium buzzed with energy. Cameramen adjusted their lenses, guests filed into velvet seats, and a new generation of dreamers, students, drivers, janitors, nurses, stood waiting to share their stories. At the front of the stage stood a tall young man in a fitted navy suit, adjusting his tie nervously. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he looked at the growing crowd. It was Darnell. The boy who once parked cars outside fancy hotels was now the executive director of the very foundation Marcus had built. He turned to the portrait on the wall behind him. Marcus Reed's face, smiling warmly in his signature dark suit. Plaque beneath it read, Dignity doesn't wear a uniform. It wears humanity. Darnell smiled to himself. You'd probably tell me to breathe right now, huh, boss? He whispered under his breath. Moments later, he stepped up to the podium. The microphone caught his voice as the hall went still. 10 years ago, Darnell began, a man taught me that no job is small, and no dream is unreachable. He didn't just give me a scholarship. He gave me a reason to believe that kindness can change entire systems. He paused, glancing at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, from executives to waiters, all united in the same room. Mr. Marcus Reed showed us what happens when the world finally listens to those it once ignored. He proved that the line between service and success is drawn only by those afraid to cross it. The audience nodded, clapping softly. And though he's no longer here today, Darnell continued, voice steady, his work lives on. This year, the foundation has funded over 10,000 scholarships, supported 3,000 small business owners, and helped countless workers move from minimum wage to management. Applause thundered through the hall. But that's not the part that makes me proudest, Darnell said, smiling now. The part that moves me most is that every single one of those programs was started by someone who once felt invisible. In the front row sat Maria Wentworth, now older, her hair streaked with silver. She continued her nonprofit, New Beginnings, and partnered with the foundation. Tears shone in her eyes as she watched Darnell speak. When he finished, she stood, leading the applause. Marcus would be proud, she whispered to herself. After the ceremony, Darnell walked outside into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled of spring, fresh, alive, full of promise. He stepped into the plaza, where a bronze statue stood tall and graceful. Marcus Reed, sculpted mid-stride, holding open a door, not for a billionaire, not for a politician, but for an ordinary worker. The inscription below read, "For everyone who was ever told to wait outside." People passed by, touching the base of the statue for luck before heading off to interviews, night shifts, or classrooms. Darnell stood silently for a moment, hands in his pockets. Then he felt a tap on his shoulder. A young woman in a delivery uniform smiled nervously. "Sir, I just wanted to say, your speech, it really hit me. I'm saving up to study engineering, but most people just tell me to stick to delivery work." Darnell smiled warmly. "What's your name?" "Erica." He nodded. "Well, Erica, don't let them box you in. Marcus Reed used to say, you can start by holding the door. Just don't stop until you own the building." Her eyes widened. "He really said that?" "More than once," Darnell laughed. "Come by the foundation tomorrow. We've got programs that can help." She blinked. "You'd really do that?" He nodded. "Someone once did it for me." That evening, Darnell returned to his office. On his desk sat an old framed photograph, one that Marcus had given him years ago. It showed the two of them standing outside the gala that started it all. Marcus in his tuxedo, Darnell still in his valet uniform, both smiling under the streetlights. Tucked behind the frame was a handwritten note Marcus had left him before his passing. "You don't measure a man by how high he climbs, but by how many he pulls up with him. Keep pulling, kid." "Marcus." Darnell closed his eyes for a moment, the words hitting him with quiet power. Then he turned off the lamp, stepped out onto the balcony, and looked down at the city glowing beneath him. The same streets where Marcus once drove, invisible. He whispered to the night, "You didn't just change lives, sir. You changed how we see each other." A soft breeze passed through the open door, almost like an answer. Epilogue. Months later, another gala was held at the same hotel, now renamed the Reed Grand. This time, the walls were lined with portraits of workers, not donors. The bartenders, housekeepers, cooks, and valets who had once gone unnoticed were now honored as everyday heroes. And outside the ballroom, engraved in gold, were the words that had started it all. "Respect the ones who serve you, because tomorrow they might lead you." As the music began and the lights dimmed, the doors opened for the guests of honor. Not billionaires, not celebrities, but the people who kept the world running quietly. In that moment, Marcus Reed's story wasn't just remembered. It was reborn in every handshake, every thank you, every small act of recognition that said, "We see you now." And that, more than any fortune or headline, was the real legacy he left behind.